Since US Vice President J.D. Vance warned delegates at the Munich Security Conference in February about alleged infringements of democracy and free speech in Europe, there's been heightened attention on the role of the courts in European politics. This week, judges in France convicted far-right presidential frontrunner Marine Le Pen of embezzling EU funds, giving her an immediate 5-year ban on standing for office, with some Le Pen allies comparing this to the exclusion by Romanian authorities of far-right candidate Pen and Georgescu from the rerun of the 2024 election next month. Whatever side of the debate you're on, it's clear the relationship between governments and judiciaries is becoming a more difficult question across Europe and the West. So in this video, we'll explain the Le Pen and Georgescu cases, the idea of lawfare, and whether it's on the rise. Who's more influential, Trump or Putin? Well, we asked the TLDR team and audience to rank a bunch of powerful people, and we have the results. Find out the full list in the next copy of our magazine Too Long. Pre-order a copy by clicking the link in the description. First though, let's recap the events in France and Romania. Last week, France's leading presidential candidate, Marine Le Pen, was convicted of embezzling €4.4 million of EU Parliament funds earmarked for staff in Brussels who were actually working for her French political party, the National Rally. The court banned her from standing for public office for 5 years, giving her a 4-year prison sentence, of which 2 years are suspended, and a €100,000 fine. However, the court's decision to ban Le Pen from public office was criticised by her allies. Jordan Bardella, the National Rally's president, said that French democracy is being executed. Putin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said more and more European capitals are going down the path of trampling democratic norms. And Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban simply posted on X, "Je suis Marine." Others, namely Italian Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini, drew comparisons between Le Pen's situation and that of Romania's far-right presidential candidate Pen and Georgescu, who was barred by the country's constitutional court from standing again in the rerun of the 2024 presidential election in May, due to concerns over funding and ties to extremist groups. These events have led to accusations of political bias against Europe's courts, with Le Pen and Georgescu claiming the rulings against them were politically motivated. In other words, the political establishment was using what's sometimes known as lawfare to undermine democracy. In fact, Le Pen even echoed Donald Trump's rhetoric after losing the 2020 election, saying, "We will not allow the French people to have the presidential election stolen from them." So, do Le Pen and co. have a point? Is lawfare, i.e. the use of the judiciary by governments for political purposes, actually an issue for European democracies? Well, Le Pen's argument seems to be that the court banned her from standing for election because she was the frontrunner for the 2027 French presidential election. Or in her words, because we're on the verge of winning power. Le Pen is claiming that France's political establishment, led by Macron, just wanted to block her from running because they felt threatened. It's true that in other countries recently, we have seen these dynamics. In Turkey, for instance, it's become clear to the international press that Turkish President Erdogan has jailed his main rival, Ekrem İmamoğlu, on spurious charges including corruption, extortion, bribery, money laundering and supporting terrorism, to prevent him from challenging Erdogan at the next Turkish presidential election in 2028. But Le Pen was convicted with evidence of embezzling more than €4 million of EU funds, and there's no suspicion it was directed by Macron. It's a similar story with Georgescu. While it's true that he was performing well in the polls, it's also hard to deny that he broke campaign financing laws. Even if you don't agree with the other charges against him, he claimed to have spent nothing during the election, which is hard to square with a massive pro-Georgescu campaign we saw on TikTok and other social media. Le Pen also argued, like other convicted politicians have, that the court's ruling against her was political. This is the same line we've heard from figures like Donald Trump, who called his indictment a witch hunt, jailed English far-right activist Tommy Robinson, and former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, who's currently on trial for an alleged coup plot, and actually compared his own trial to Le Pen's last week, saying, "Here and in France, this is pure lawfare. The left has found an easy way to perpetuate itself in power by using judicial activism." But Le Pen is far from the only French politician in recent years to be convicted by the courts. Two of France's former centre-right presidents, Nicolas Sarkozy and Jacques Chirac, were both convicted of corruption after their terms. and 5 of the last 6 centre-right French prime ministers before Macron have faced criminal charges. Jean-Luc Mélenchon, the leader of the far-left La France Insoumise party, has also been under investigation since 2017 for a fake job scandal in the European Parliament, similar to Le Pen's, and could soon face legal action. This all cuts against Le Pen's implicit claim that France's judiciary treats some politicians, namely those on the right, more harshly than others. Now, you might argue that, in a way, all these court rulings against politicians are political. After all, it's politicians themselves who make and amend the law, and judges and juries can't help but be influenced by the news. But again, it's hard to argue that the laws under which Le Pen and Georgescu have been sentenced, one banning embezzlement of EU funds, the other requiring transparent campaign finances, are unreasonable. It's not like in Turkey, where there's a law banning you from insulting the president or various senior officials, which is one of the charges facing Imamoglu. Nonetheless, even if Le Pen's cries of lawfare look a bit suspect, it's at least true, and perhaps as important, that there does seem to be a growing perception of lawfare on the rise in Europe, especially on the right. It used to be more common to hear the left complaining about lawfare from the right, who could use expensive lawyers to suppress progressive criticism. But it now seems to be more common to hear the right appealing to the trope of lefty lawyers, apparently stymieing the will of the people. This seems to be a result of something we discuss in depth in our brand new Too Long magazine, which is the post-trust era. In other words, trust in judges and legal systems has been slowly eroding over the past decade or so, to the point that lawyers, traditionally well-regarded trusted professionals, are now increasingly viewed as part of the liberal establishment, at least on parts of the right. This is precisely the kind of argument that anti-establishment figures like Le Pen want to take root, because it helps them portray themselves as outsiders who can be trusted. Whether this tactic will actually work, i.e. whether the French electorate will buy Le Pen's argument, remains to be seen. But either way, the decline of trust in institutions is generally bad news for European democracy generally. This story, like much of the news, is worth paying attention to in the weeks ahead. Because with geopolitics in flux and Trump throwing the international order up in the air, there's a lot to keep an eye on. Every day we're faced with weird headlines, from Musk declaring anyone who looks at him the wrong way a terrorist, to Trump declaring war on Jupiter to try to regain some extraterrestrial allies. Okay, that one isn't real, but we do dive into the weird world of US politics in our series WTF USA. That's our show where we take big moments from culture and social media and try to explain the political implications of, say, Musk running around trying to put out Tesla fires. Unlike some of our other serious videos, the tone of WTF is more light-hearted and takes something of an irreverent look at what's going on. If you're interested, WTF USA can be found exclusively on Nebula. Nebula is also the home to other incredible original content from your favourite creators, like Tom Nicholas's Boomers. Discussing everything from generational inequality, housing, the climate crisis and pensions, the globe-trotting feature-length documentary tries to unpack the questionable legacy of the baby boomers. If you didn't know, Nebula is an independent creator-owned streaming platform that specialises in thoughtful content, from creators like Real Life Law, Wendover Productions, Legal Eagle and Neo. It's not just WTF USA either. You can also watch every normal TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in some instances before they even land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, click our link in the description to get 40% off. That's just $36 a year or $3 a month. So take the news a little less seriously and check out WTF only on Nebula.